Hey, what's going on? It's Andre de la Monica, and it's time for the MEM Xperience podcast. And today we're going to talk about some very exciting stuff. Again, we're going to talk about all things Windows Update for Business. And for that, I have my special guest here to cover this with us. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, Andre, thanks for having me. My name is Aria. I am a program manager on the Windows Update platform team, and I primarily work on helping commercial customers manage Windows updates, whether that's with Windows Server Update Service, WUFB, or any way in between.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining, Aria. I really appreciate you here. Aria is a great partner for our team. She joins customer calls with us. She partners with us a lot in the feature side, in the customer connection side as well. So you're awesome. Thank you for the partnership here. Really appreciate it. And others in my team appreciate it as well. So yeah, before we jump
I like your team.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. So anyway, before we talk about the Windows Update for Business, all things Windows Update for Business, Aria, I just want to ask you a first question here. How did you join Microsoft?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually have never, before working at Microsoft, worked at a real company, I guess. So I did startup stuff. I grew up doing startup stuff. I did that for a long time. When I graduated college, I went into the startup world as a startup consultant, had my own company, did a lot of that stuff. And one of my friends who was in that space ended up working at Microsoft, and he had done internships there and loved it. And so he was like, no, you have to apply, it's fine, you have to apply.
Nice.
And I was consulting at the time for a company, helping them with both their marketing, sales, and HR strategy of how do you build a good culture within your startup. So I said, fine, like I'll do the interview. At the very least, it'll teach me a little bit about Microsoft's HR processes. So it's fine. So I got the interview. I did the first one. It went terribly. They asked me coding questions. I do not have a CS background. I'm a mechanical engineer and did business, so I was really bad. And then, luckily, the call connection quality was terrible, so it turns out they couldn't hear a word I said incorrectly. And so then they followed up an email to ask me questions about a certain project, and I provided huge details in the email and got an in-person interview.
There we go.
And so then I did the interview. I guess it wasn't completely terrible. And they liked my passion, even though all I'd done previously was healthcare and startup stuff. So
Okay.
it worked out okay.
That's
And then
awesome.
I decided, why not try a big company for a year? I'll probably quit right then. And it's been 3 years, so I guess I was wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so how so it was the Windows Update team in Windows team that you joined in the first place, or you joined a different team?
Yeah. So I actually originally joined on a different team within my current org, but John Cable, who is my boss, who none of you know, so this is irrelevant, but he's my boss's boss's boss, and he actually interviewed me, and I stayed on his organization.
Oh, okay.
So.
And then how did you transition to kind of, because I know you're very passionate, like I see your tweets and your blog posts are great as well. I think everybody appreciates your, all the good info that you share in the blog posts as well. So how did you end up joining or started this passion for Windows Update?
Yeah, so I have always cared more about businesses than consumers. 90% of what I've always done is more business to business kind of product management. And so for me, that was really interesting, was how do commercial customers manage? And I first actually started working on the Windows Insider program for business, which I still work on to this day.
Okay.
And if you're an admin watching this, you should actually start your validations using the Windows Insider program for business with all of those production signed bits before we release. But that actually opened the door. And I will say the way I got into Windows updates was when I started, I sat in a cubicle, a very tiny, we had no window. And the guy sitting next to me was my teammate. And he had already been working at the company for a year or two. And so I sat down and my manager gave me a list of things to Google to learn. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. And so this teammate ended up saying, you know what, just follow me to all of my meetings. You can stalk me. It'll be okay.
Oh, okay.
Come stalk me and write down a list of acronyms, because at Microsoft, we love acronyms.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'll help you. And so he turns out he actually worked on Windows Update for Business. And I followed him around, and it turns out he was just conning me, because about 6 months later, he was like, gotcha. Now that you know everything about Windows Update for Business, you can own it.
Oh, there we go. Okay, now I see. So you're kind of prepared before joining officially the Windows Update
Prepared,
space.
conned into,
Right.
Sure. Whatever word you want to choose.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I didn't know about this background history about you joining the team. That's really good. Thanks for sharing here. Yeah, so let's then start talking about Windows Update for Business. I know you're kind of dying to start talking about this, right? Before I think we talk about all the good stuff, the new stuff that you're working on. Well, before we go there, let me just ask you a question before. So what are the areas that you own within the Windows Update for Business team as a PM?
Yeah. I don't know why people think this team is so big, but so I specifically, what I care about and work on is a variety of different things. But one of those is the client-side policies. So anytime you're setting a Windows Update group policy, configuration service provider, CSP, under the update node or under the policy update node, whether that's through a mobile device management tool or not, is something that I specifically work on and help drive. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, I help inform broad decisions over a variety of different things, such as publishing WSUS stuff in new categories and things like that. Or how does the Windows Update for Business end user experience look, right? Should your end user see that notification that they're blocked by a safeguard hold or not? Should your end user be notified that they're end of service? Should we instead show that in analytics? Those are all kind of some of the questions that I work on specifically within this realm that is Windows Update for Business. That and trying to bug commercial customers to tell me more about what they want so we can build that.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, so let's then start talking about Windows Update for Business here. Before I think we go, now let me go again there. Before we talked about, you talk about the new stuff that you're working on, etc. I'd love for us to level set, on what is the Windows Update for Business.
Yeah. So one thing of what is Windows Update for Business is Windows Update for Business is just a platform. It's a set of controls that you can set, whether through policy, configuration service provider policies, or our new WUFB deployment service. This is the platform. On top of that, there are management tools, whether that's the free first-party management tools such as Group Policy Management Console, or that's Intune, or if that's third-party mobile device management tools, or management tools for group policy. We support all of those. And so Windows Update for Business is just that platform of controls and the umbrella term for someone updating from the cloud, right, or Windows Update.
Okay, cool. That's great. So yeah, I think you kind of touched on the next question that I had for you here, which is, what are kind of the mechanisms that we have that we support, right? That you support to manage those settings, right? Those Windows Update for Business settings. And you already mentioned a GPO, Intune, and Configuration Manager as well, and even third-party solutions, right? So what will be kind of the difference from your perspective as you're working every day in this feature when using group policies, Intune versus Configuration Manager, for example? What would be the difference between these three?
Yeah, for sure. So I think they're fundamentally different, right? At the end, there's two bases. You're getting your updates from Windows Update Service, aka WSUS, or you're getting your updates from Windows Update. There's also media, but we're just going to throw that out the window for the moment since it's more of a complicated story. So if you're getting your updates from Windows Server Update Service, We publish every update there, pretty much. And you get to choose, okay, I want this specific category of updates to be downloaded to my server. Once they're downloaded to my server, I'm going to say I want this specific update to go and be deployed to the client. And you have full control of which update is offered when. In Configuration Manager, they give you even more control by having a client on the device that says, here's how you're going to download, here's how you're going to install, here's how you're going to restart. And I'm going to give you control over all of it. You're going to have so many knobs, you won't even know what to do with 90% of them. Now, if you flip that switch, you're saying, okay, I want to try Windows updates. Instead of you downloading these updates to your server or servers and then pushing them out that way, your devices are going to connect directly to Windows Update. Now, you're going to set policy. Some of those policies are going to be on the client. Some are going to communicate directly to the server. But either way, you're configuring policy to say which updates should be offered. This is way different, right? Like, you're not going to have a list and you're picking and choosing and saying, I want this at this time. I need to approve every single update. No. What you need to do is say, okay, I'm going to move at this cadence so that I have the time to validate the way I need to. And if I find an issue, I can pause. In Windows Update, you're going to have way fewer controls, but you're going to have way more built-in protections. You're going to have the built-in native update stack that is going to protect you from a download, install, commit perspective. You're going to have the server, which is going to protect you in terms of safeguards. And you're going to have an overall better experience, because the experience you're going to get is the one that has been built up over years and years and years of getting feedback from billions of consumers that experience these updates.
Right.
And you'll still have some controls. It'll just be a little bit less.
I see. Okay, so from a business perspective, Aria, one thing that I like to touch on in this podcast is kind of the whys. I think the whys, why we create this feature, why we created this product, etc., really helps the customer with the what is it, right, and the how. So can you kind of highlight some of the kind of the whys, because in the Windows Update for Business, it can be a little bit confusing because it's a new technology, it's coming, etc. And with the fact that there's different mechanisms, right, to achieve kind of the same goal. Different mechanisms being GPOs, Configuration Manager, Intune, etc. What are kind of the whys? Why should people, like, for example, a customer think of using Intune versus Configuration Manager versus GPOs for deploying Windows Update for Business policies?
Yeah, for sure. So you've got to recognize, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I've talked to a ton of customers. No one's in the same shoes. No organization is the same, right? There are companies out there who have 10 devices.
Good point.
There are companies that have 250,000 devices.
Yep.
They don't have the same concerns. They don't have the same issues. And so the why is going to be a little different depending on what organization you're in, what your business needs are, what your goals are. But I can talk about some of the basic ones. The first thing, and you may have heard this before, is that it's a journey. And the destination isn't the same for everyone. There might be certain people who are using on-premise management today because they're in an air-gapped environment. And one customer, I really remember vividly, we were talking on weirdly a plane coming back from one of the Ignite conferences. And he was like, no, like, I'm never going to move to Windows Update for Business. I'm never going to be cloud attached. And I was like, wow, really? Why? And he's like, we contain nuclear codes. If anyone got into our system, like, we are not allowed to have anything go outside of our air-gapped environment. And I was like, you know what? That's a really good reason. I agree. Like, I don't want anyone getting those codes. Please don't let any USBs even come in. Like, we're good. And so for them, the why is, no, you're in an air-gapped environment. You want to do updates via media. That is all for you. Please stay there. You're good. I understand. I'll stop harassing you. It's fine. But unless you're in that situation, the why is going to be a lot more about how do we get you cloud attached. Now, if you're using Configuration Manager today or you're using WSS today, you'll note you are probably spending a fairly decent amount of time on your management overhead, whether that's validating the updates, whether that is figuring out which ones to be deployed, whether that's just sitting there and pressing the button when it's ready for every single update that is ready. That is a huge amount of management overhead. That's expensive, not just in man hours and effort, but like overall, your job is difficult. Imagine a world where you could take benefit of what Microsoft already knows without having to go look on the docs page to see it posted there. That's really why cloud attach is so important. Whether you're going to move fully to Intune, fully to the cloud, or you're just going to sit in the middle moving certain workloads over to the cloud, I think it really depends on your story and how quickly you want to get where.
Sure.
But the why I see most commercial customers ending up in a state where they're either fully in the cloud or they're cloud attached. You can totally continue having your config man and your Intune. In fact, you get them both for free together in MEM, so it's one price for both.
Exactly.
I see a lot of customers ending up there because you can leverage the huge benefits of the cloud, whether that's things like getting drivers. Have you tried to get drivers on Windows Server Update Service? It's terrible. The story is just not there. You're taking those drivers directly from OEMs and having to figure it out and repackage them and publish them. It's terrible. Windows Update makes that story way easier. And we have some cool new exciting announcements coming out in the upcoming months, and some that have already been talked a little bit about at the Spring Ignite, where the driver story for Windows Update is getting better.
Yeah, that's huge.
And we're getting to a point where we can enable you to do it more and more. And we have some exciting announcements coming out later this month that are going to make that story even easier for you moving some of your workloads over to the cloud. And that's just one example, right? The other examples are all of the built-in protections of the WUFB deployment service is literally added, and Intune is already using it for feature update deployments. So not only can you pick exactly which feature update you want, but we're going to be able to actually talk from the service to your management tool. What this means is you have the whole potential for what that's going to bring. Like we're talking about the existing features today of, hey, I want this one now. But imagine the future tomorrow of you're going to know all of the times that Microsoft finds an issue and thinks there might be a problem. We're not going to deploy to your device, and we'll alert you that we're not going to deploy to your device and why. And so you can leverage those built-in sensors where, hey, we're going out to 2 billion consumer devices. We have a whole ton of signals coming in about what issues might be there. Wouldn't it be great to take advantage of those signals and have your devices automatically protected? And that's one of the benefits you get, and you can only get by getting cloud attached. And so those are, at least to me, some of the big reasons to go cloud attached for those who want those benefits for Windows updates. And then, of course, there's a whole ton of benefits for outside of the Windows Update story as well.
No, this is great, Aria. I really like the way you framed that and you talked about that because in a way you really did is you really kind of give a lot of kind of real life examples of traditional management and the pain points for this area, right? For managing updates versus modern management, right? Which is the cloud attached story, or even for those customers that are not using SCCM or don't want to use SCCM anymore, just want to go straight to Intune, for example, right? So I really like that. I think this is great. So any other comments you have there because I'm just kind of keeping asking you questions all the time.
It's fine. I would say the one other thing, and this came up recently on Twitter, I think someone said that they were so overwhelmed by the movement and how to get there. And I'm going to be honest, like, I get it. We are marketing all the time. Go to the cloud, go to the cloud, go to the cloud. But this might sound bad. Now, I don't know if this should be cut out of the podcast, but like, do what's right for you on the cadence that's right for you.
Right.
As long as you're staying supported and protected and taking security updates. That one's non-negotiable. Like if you don't take a security update and someone hacks your system, I'm going to have problems with that, especially if you have my credit card information. But otherwise, if you're taking security updates, don't rush into things, right? Like get cloud attached first. Build comfortability with being cloud attached and then move your ecosystem there. Take advantage of the cloud for sure, but don't get overwhelmed, right? Like this is something we're really trying to enable you to take baby steps towards, right? Even in Configuration Manager and Intune world for Microsoft Endpoint Manager, we're trying to enable you to move certain workloads over one at a time so that you don't need to move everything over at once.
Right.
And you shouldn't need to. Your organization has different needs than my organization, than other person's organization. And so I think a big thing to remember is, hey, what are we trying to get out of this? And what do we want to take advantage of? Because then instead of just quickly moving every single group policy we've had since Windows 7 into our Intune portal, you don't need that. We can take our time and reassess and actually decide to have a better end user experience and an easier management experience with lower overhead in the long run.
Yeah.
So my one feedback is do what's right for you. It'll be good.
Yeah, I love this because that's exactly the promise of Endpoint Manager, right? So people had this kind of feeling, right, that endpoint SCCM was going to go away, for example, right? And then like all the software update point, like all the granular controls that SCCM provides for Windows Update Management, along with reporting, etc., was going to go away as well. But that's exactly why we rebranded the product even to Endpoint Manager, and having the two of them, attached and connected, right, and kind of working seamlessly. Because we want to give people the flexibility, exactly what you just said, like do what's right for you. You want to keep using SCCM, all right, so keep using SCCM, right? You want to go Intune, all right, here it is, and you can start doing it and maybe do like a mix, as you said. So I love this. Makes total sense, and I totally agree. So you're going to say something? Sorry, maybe I cut you off.
Oh, I was just gonna say, if you're using task sequences though.
Oh.
Hot take. Feature update experience in Configuration Manager is now way better. And the Intune feature update experience is even better than that. So please stop using task sequences unless it really meets your needs, because gosh, that stuff is really painful to debug.
Yeah, and complex. Yeah, I totally agree. So, okay, so let me see here. So I have, so people know here. So what I did was I talked to a few customers. So I have a kind of list of kind of questions that I have for Aria here based on what I heard from customers. And what I try to do in this podcast, I'm really trying, is to represent those customer questions. And, so in this case, Aria here can answer them and giving her take, since she's the feature owner for this area, right? So I can give my take as well, but Aria is really the feature owner for Windows Update here. So it would be great to get her take here. So okay. So I have I have some kind of weird questions for you, Aria. You're gonna see in a few minutes here. Before we go there to the weird questions, let's talk about more kind of the normal questions. Can you talk a little bit about the update baselines? Why it's a great resource for customers?
Yeah, so the update baseline, as well as the documentation that we have around recommended policies. For example, the recent Ignite talk that Kay Toma and I did. And I love that because Kay Toma actually made the update baseline, which is amazing to see. I think that these are good resources for customers who maybe haven't really learned about the Windows Update policies yet, or have and are using them but haven't checked back since 3 years ago. Just for those of you who aren't aware, probably back in, 1709, around there, we had quite a small set of policies. Most of them are the same ones that we'd had since introducing Windows 10, or we've had since Windows 7. And what we've done over the past 3 years is added a tremendous number of policies, which is good and bad. But there's a tremendous increase in the number of policies and what they do, as well as improvements. For one example would be compliance deadline. We have 4 different policies that can enable deadlines in group policy worlds. Guess what? Only one of them is recommended. So the good thing about Update Baseline and these other resources that we've been putting out there are trying to tell customers what policies they should and shouldn't be setting, and why they should and shouldn't be setting them. As in, like, what is the impact? Because really, when you think about managing as an IT pro, it's, from my opinion, and feel free to correct this, anyone watching this who actually is an IT admin, since you are far wiser than me, is I want to keep devices protected on whatever security compliance goals I have and productive, meaning I don't want my end users to be calling help desk. I don't want them to be yelling at me. And I want those restarts to be as quick as possible when they aren't there, and their files to not be impacted by such, or whatever tasks they're running to be impacted by such. And so with those goals in mind, the update baseline tries to talk to how the different policies we have contribute towards being protected or productive, and both. Right. Although that's kind of hard. It's normally a trade-off.
Right. Okay. This is great. Yes. Great. Can you maybe then kind of following kind of this, a few topics that you mentioned here, can you maybe address here in this podcast some of the kind of the common policy configuration mistakes that IT pros can make? I don't know if you need to do a demo for that, or you want to do
I would love to do a demo for that. Can we cut to the my screen?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so we have you on screen, Aria.
Sweet. So let's first talk about Intune, since this is Microsoft's first-party mobile device management, or MDM tool, and uses Windows Update for Business. So the first thing I want to talk about when we're talking about policies that aren't really recommended is going to be in the Windows 10 update rings. So if you go to Windows 10 update rings and you, sorry for the delay, my Wi-Fi is terrible, you create a profile. You will then be able to name it whatever you want. Try one.
There you go.
And you'll see the update ring settings. Now, you'll see there's a ton of settings. The key to remember 99% of the time is default is the best. And in every talk you will ever see me give or tweet I will put out, I will typically be recommending the default setting, except for deadlines. So what does this mean here? Well, this means like you can choose for the first ones, offering, I don't know. Offering is really up to you. Where do you want to get them from? One key thing to remember, if you're using the new feature update deployment policy in Intune that's on the other page, please set deferral period days to 0. If you configure deferrals to be some value that's non-zero and you target a specific version, you won't get the version you targeted until it actually reaches your deferral period of days old. Now, this isn't a problem if you're targeting something that's been out for a long time, but if you're trying to move to 20H2, for example, and you still have 365 days of deferrals, you won't actually be able to get 20H2 until 20H2 is a year old, which is probably not your intent. So please check your settings. Now, the next thing I want to call out is under the update experience, user experience settings. You will note, obviously, Intune does not surface every single CSP that we make. They only surface some of them. They get to choose. We work with them to choose, but they are a management tool and surface whatever controls they feel like. The first thing I want to recommend here is automatic update behavior. Please, please, please reset it to default. I understand there are some cases where you don't want this to be true, but 9 times out of 10, you want it to be the default. And the default behavior, for those of you who aren't aware, is it will automatically download, automatically install, and then restart according to your policies. And the reason you want it to automatically do this is because it can actually determine when your user is doing certain things on the device and say, oh, maybe now is a bad time to download, or, oh, nope, maybe now is a good time to download, depending on user activity. Versus you have no idea what your end user is doing on that device. Now, again, the policies I'm showing you right now and recommendations are for one-to-one devices. That means scenarios where your user actually has that device, like a laptop or a desktop monitor, things like that. Not necessarily for shared devices or in the EDU scenario of having a device at school that's left there overnight. Just putting that out there because I've got a whole different set of recommendations for those. For the next one, restart checks. This policy, really you can do whatever you want with. I would recommend allowing it. If you don't allow us to start for restart checks, we might accidentally, start restarting in the middle of, a recording like this podcast. And that would suck since we don't have any extra time booked. I would really allow your end user to pause Windows updates. Again, this is up to you, but imagine that you are the end user or your own device and you're setting these policies and then you try to go and pause updates because you are running code for all week, or you have a sales pitch due on Friday, and it turns out you can't pause updates, and for some reason you can't save your work, and now you're just annoyed at your admin. Personally, I don't like people annoyed at me, but again, for compliance reasons, this might also just be because Microsoft grays out my ability to pause and it annoys me. But to each their own. It's fine, not salty or anything. The bigger feedback, which I'm very serious about, and none of you, I actually am having this debate with people right now. There's very, very few reasons that someone who's updating from Windows Update should ever disable your end user's ability to check for updates. Like, all of you doing that, please stop. Like, why are you doing that? It seems that there's this misconception that someone going to the settings page and being like, hey, I want updates. Let me go to my update settings page. Hold on. I'm gonna be honest, this may or may not work. My computer is running dev channel Windows Insider program builds.
Okay, makes sense.
But if your end user decides to go to that Windows Update settings page and you gray out their ability to do stuff, they won't be able to download updates. They won't be able to install updates. They won't be able to click on those notifications to download or install updates. It's a terrible experience. Further, even if your end user goes to Windows Update page and you don't gray it out and they decide to check for updates, guess what? The only updates that are going to be offered to them are updates that would have been available to them anyway based on their policy. This means you're graying out their ability to just prompt a scan. By itself, the scan will happen roughly every 22 hours. All this check for updates button does for someone updating from Windows Update is going to give them that stuff a little bit sooner. And so again, I'd recommend really, really, really enable their option to check for updates. Please don't take this away from the end user. It can cause really bad experiences. Especially, for example, if you click notify to download here and you disable your end user's ability to check for updates, this device will never update until it reaches deadline. That is a terrible experience and puts you in an insecure state.
Right.
And now my last recommendation on this page of things to not configure is, oh my goodness, these two policies don't work if you configure deadline. Meaning, please do not set these and expect these to work if you configure deadline. In deadline, we've built out a user flow that really works to determine how to show notifications when the end user is there without annoying the end user and while ensuring that they meet the deadline, which means that this flow is taking end user behavior into account. So these settings will not be honored.
I have a question for you there then.
Okay, so I have a
What
question.
is the difference between, that's a common question for customers as well. What is the difference between deadline and grace period?
Yeah, for sure. So this deadline policy was added back, I think, last year, and it works a bit differently. So deadline is basically saying, okay, I want my devices to update within this period of time. Let's say 7 days for feature updates and 2 days for quality updates, or sorry, 3 days for quality updates and a 2-day grace period. So it's saying, okay, I want my devices to download, install, and restart within 7 days of the update being offered to the device. Now, what happens if my device is off? Or I'm going on vacation and I shut my device and I go on vacation and I try to never think about Windows updates. And then I come back and it's been 2 weeks past when the feature update was offered to my device. Well, either I open my device and let's say I have no grace period. Well, the deadline's passed. If the deadline is passed and I have no grace period, well, then that update is going to download, install as quickly as it can, and then force a restart, which means I'll just see a notification saying your device is ready to restart. It's restarting at this time, restart. That's a pretty crappy experience for someone just coming back from vacation whose computer has been off. So what grace period does is saying, hey, if you, from the time you reach pending restart, which means, okay, I open my device and download and install as quickly as possible because I'm past the deadline. Oh, but I'm pending restart. Yes, I'm past the deadline, but I have not spent 2 days since pending restart trying to take this update. So grace period is basically what it says, a grace period. It gives you a period of time after your deadline potentially has passed, but you reach pending reboot to actually take that update and do the restart. So now instead of being forced on day 0 when I come back from vacation, I'm only going to be forced 2 days later. And so I've got a bit more time to adjust and take it and apply it to my device.
If I can summarize, let me know if, keep me honest here. So the deadline then, it's about the update installation, right? So when you're thinking about deadline or setting as an IT pro, you're thinking about the update installation, right? And the grace period, it's about, okay, the update was installed, but then how we're going to communicate with the end user about a pending reboot, for example, or something that's, has to be done to finalize that update after the install was completed. Is that a right way to put?
That's a good way to think about it. I would say, though, about 80 to 90% of the time, the people are going to actually restart by the deadline, not just necessarily wait and force the install at the end of the deadline. So the device will still, in any of these cases, try to download and install at the right time for the end user, and then start the restart. You are right. If it's still, the install hasn't happened by a certain period of time, it will be forced. But you can actually think about it in terms of, grace period is applying from pending restart until the restart, versus deadline has to do more with the download and the install as well.
This is great. This is great clarification. So yeah, you want to show us more kind of the cool stuff, or you're good with the demo? Go ahead.
Sure. I will show you one other thing really quickly, if you don't mind, which is group policy.
Go ahead.
This is going to be my local group policy, since I don't have group policy management console set up right now.
No worries.
Sorry. But really quickly, maybe I will just walk you through a few things in group policy, because I think one of the misconceptions that people often have is that group policy and configuration service provider, or CSP policies, are identical for Windows updates. And they're not. We actually have certain things that are available in configuration service provider that are not available in group policy, and vice versa. A good example of this is in Intune, you can roll back a feature update or a quality update. In group policy, we don't provide that same kind of rollback behavior. So you can't actually roll back a feature or a quality update. And so that's just one thing I wanted to call out, because it's an interesting dichotomy of you're not going to have a one-to-one mapping. Additionally, a lot of these policies that you're going to see in group policy aren't really recommended. And some aren't even supported on Windows 10. And so when you're looking at your group policies, and I know some of you have had the same group policy set since Windows 7, and that's okay, it's fine. But you might want to reevaluate before you try to continue getting updates. At least not expecting some of these to do anything. Like a good example is do not display install updates and shutdown. This does nothing on Windows 10. And we are considering changing up the group policy templates and making this a bit easier to say which policies are recommended, which ones are supported, and which ones can be used to do what. But I feel like that's something I really just want to remind people about is please look at your group policies. We now have lots of documentation of how you can go through them and see what's recommended, what's not. Whether you're using WSS Standalone or Windows Update for Business, just it's a good thing to do. And that would be all from a demo perspective, unless you have more questions. I have more questions
now. We're going to go to a different set of questions that I called weird questions. And of course, I'm just joking.
Oh, okay.
They're more of the common questions. Actually, what you mentioned about the update rollback, well, part of the update CSP, it's also a function where you roll back the update, right? So that's a very common question. I know you already got this question because I've seen you talking about that as well in different kind of customer events. What if, okay, I'm going with this Windows Update for Business thing, right? So I want to modernize my management, my update management. Now, how should I think about pausing problematic individual updates, right? So is there an option for us? I know you already touched on the rollback option, but I'll let you answer that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we get this a lot of okay, I'm listening to your instructions. I grouped my devices. I'm rolling out in waves. You're killing it. But then something happens, right? And it's rare, but it happens. There's a printer issue. Oh, that may be too soon. But if there's a printer issue and then you pause, right? You hit that pause button, which sets the pause start date and says you're going to be paused for 35 days from today. A lot of people keep requesting, can we have pause for a specific quality update? So maybe it's good to explain how pause works. Pause is pausing all things deemed as quality update for 35 days. We only release security marked or critical marked updates to Windows Update for Business. This means the only updates you're getting, essentially, are those security patch Tuesday updates, roughly once a month, unless there's an out-of-band release. And so when you think about it, you are getting a button to just pause a specific quality update. So long as you adjust your deferrals so that your devices jump straight from and whatever update they're on now over the bad update to the next one, assuming the next one fixes your issue. And so from that perspective, you can use pause to essentially skip a specific quality update.
And you can do that, and keep me honest again, at least last time I tested this, I could. You can also do that from the Intune portal as well, where you have an option for the update deployment where you say, pause the quality update, for example.
Yeah, for sure. You can definitely do that from the Intune portal as well. And for any of those problematic devices that may have updated prior to you saying pause, you actually have to pause them as well before you can roll back. So that makes it nice because all of the devices in your ecosystem are then paused and rolled back to the same version.
Right. Yeah, so folks that are watching this, again, right, to Aria's point here, there's a couple options for that. And there's the option where you also can, change the behavior for the update CSP. And I'll make sure to add a documentation reference for this in the comment section of this video. The description section of this video, where you're able to roll back updates, right? It's different than SCCM, where SCCM, you can, as you create a update deployment, you can just remove one single update right from there. And then if that update is already installed, actually both Intune and SCCM have this functionality where you can just uninstall an update like through a script, or just like if it's an MSI, you can just create a Win32 app deployment from from Intune or Configuration Manager and just remove the update. Does that make sense?
That was right. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
That was good.
Cool. So one thing that I'd like also for you, Aria, to touch on, if you can, it's about 0-day updates, right? So there's those kind of urgent updates that I have to deploy. There's like a vulnerability that was released, like a fix for this vulnerability that we re-released. I want to make sure those updates are right for my devices. How should we think about this when using Windows Update for Business as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So every once in a while, probably about once or twice a year, there are these updates that are deemed mission critical, right? Like you need to get patched as soon as possible. You saw it in the news. You're like, I don't want to be vulnerable. People are yelling upstairs. You have to get it down to devices as soon as possible. And that's totally something that previously Windows Update for Business's answer to was, great, adjust your deferrals. Please adjust your deadline settings, blah, blah, blah. And that's kind of annoying. But what's really exciting and cool, and I'll put the documentation in the description as well, is we just announced we're about to go live in Intune with our Expedite updates capability. And what this will allow you to do is specify a specific quality update and say, I want it to get on the device within like this period of time, which is typically for those 0-day situations. So whenever you don't want to adjust all your policies, you can use this as a way to get that update onto the device as quickly as possible without changing your steady state. And so I'm really excited for that to go out. It's going live really, really soon, and the documentation for it is already live.
Oh, this is good. This is good. That's a good clarification point as well, and it's good to know that this is coming as well. What is the difference between 0-day fixes versus out-of-band fixes? That's like a little piece of feedback that customers give us can be a little bit confusing.
So 0 day is kind of denoted by us, but it's also really more denoted by the customer themselves of like how important do you think the security fixes or critical fixes? Sometimes Microsoft clarifies and says, no, like there's a major issue, there's a major vulnerability, take this. But most of the time, 0 day is dependent on the organization. You decide that. You decide, oh, wow, I saw this is listed as part of the KB. That's terrible. I need this ASAP. And we're talking about 0 day. Yes, it's normally security. 9 times out of 10, it's security. But occasionally, every once in a blue moon, there might be a fix that your organization has been waiting on and needs ASAP. In that case, that could be a 0 day for you. When we're talking about an out-of-band update, that's an update that was not released on a Patch Tuesday. So Patch Tuesday is the second Tuesday of the month. It's when we release our security or critically marked payloads. A 0 day update is typically a Patch Tuesday update. It's just one that has some fix that you really need. An out-of-band update is normally we found an issue in that security update that we released on Patch Tuesday and said, oh no, we need to fix that because it's bad enough that we don't want to wait for next month. And this will happen about once a year as well, where it's like, okay, we released on Patch Tuesday. Crap, that printer broke again. We need to fix that ASAP. We keep breaking printers. And then so we put out the fix. And that's going to be between that Patch Tuesday and the next month's Patch Tuesday.
Okay.
Now, something really cool, which I feel like everyone should know, but most people don't.
Go ahead.
Did you know you can use Release Preview in the Windows Insider program to test out all of the non-security and non-critical fixes that go into a Patch Tuesday update? So all of the non-security fixes actually get released 2 to 3 weeks beforehand to Windows Update and to Catalog for Windows Insider program for business folks to test if they feel like it. And this contains pretty much, because our updates are cumulative, all of the changes in the update except for the very few security ones. And so if you're really interested in getting ahead or you already have deployment waves and groups, you could start a group a little bit earlier on that optional update and get a lot of your validation done so that in case it's a security 0 day, you feel much more confident in deploying it rather than, going through your typical validation waves. Just food for thought. We will also add links for that in the description.
Exactly.
And everything else.
I love it. Yeah, you got the idea. So this is great. Share all the links we can.
Links in the description.
Exactly.
If you don't want to watch the video, please read the description.
Exactly. And also please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more notifications.
I would be really impressed by ringing the bell. Like, we don't even have a bell.
This is great, Aria. I feel like it would be good to get your take on this as well, as you living, breathing Windows Update these days. Most of kind of the feedback that I got from customers, throughout these years working with IT pros from SCCM to Intune, etc., could be fixed. Like most of kind of the pain points could be fixed by having a good process in place as well when testing updates, right? So I know we came like a long way, right, from for where we are now with Windows Update for Business, which is your feature here, but there's some learnings from our side as well. But having a consistent process for testing updates in place really helps, right? What would be your take on this comment?
No one's perfect.
Yeah.
Microsoft's not perfect.
That's right.
We're pretty darn good. The quality of Windows updates is getting better. But we are putting out updates that need to work on over 2 billion devices.
Yep.
We need to test a variety of scenarios. Your organization might be running line of business applications that do not exist anywhere else in the world except on your random hardware.
Yep.
In your organization. That's great. It's what supports your sales team. It's what allows them to do their thing. But we don't know if the update will work with your line of business applications. Mm-hmm. We don't know if it'll work with those hardware combination, application combination, because it is unique to your business. And so one thing I always tell admins is we are trying to make the best quality product we can. And for that, we need your help because we want you doing that early validation and giving us feedback. We give you free support, by the way. If you're in the release preview channel, we give you free CSS support.
There we go.
So come on. But we need you to make sure that you're protecting your organization as well and telling us when things are broken. Since I think it's very much a two-way street of we are trying to build the best management experience possible. But we are building these tools. We are not living life in your shoes.
Right.
And so I think what really needs to happen is a good melding of minds. And the more validation you do and the more feedback you give about how we can improve the update, the technology, the tooling, the better we can do in providing high quality updates, better tooling, and more information. So
that's
do validation and then give us feedback in a nice or mean way. We normally only slightly care.
Yeah.
Not about the feedback. We care a lot about the feedback.
Right. No, this is great. I think you answered in a really good way. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of unique situations, unique scenarios that customers are running that we have no way to repro in our side and kind of, to be prepared for whatever issue that an update can cause, for example, right? That's a very good point. Okay, so let's talk about, let me see, we talked about pausing the updates. So you already actually touched on the feature parity, which is great. It was one of the questions that I had here in the list about feature parity in terms of, or say settings parity between GPOs, Intune, etc. I think you already touched on that. Anything else you want to comment there?
No.
Okay. No problem. So, okay, there is this new, this is not really new, but there's this feature called update compliance, right?
Not new.
Yeah, not new at all.
Solidly not new.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about update compliance?
Yeah. So there used to be this thing called Windows Analytics. It was built on top of Log Analytics.
That's right.
Windows Analytics was deprecated. Update compliance used to be part of Windows Analytics. Update compliance was not deprecated. In fact, it is the recommended free monitoring tool for Windows updates.
There we go.
And it works regardless of what your management tool is. It doesn't matter if you're using Configuration Manager, Intune, group policies, or third-party tool, you can still use update compliance. And I would highly recommend it. Not only because it is a good way to see which devices are compliant, but we're adding new features to it all the time, including a cool feature to see if your device didn't get a feature update from Windows Update, if it was blocked because of a safeguard or a known issue that would have impacted the device. And so, if possible, I would definitely look into Log Analytics and update compliance. You can build your own reporting. It makes life way simpler. Obviously, we're still improving our analytics story. Definitely more to see there, but I think that's a good start and a really easy one for those of you who currently today don't really know what devices are getting and you want to monitor your complaints.
And guess what we're going to do, Aria? We're going to share a link in the description of this video as well about this. Can you believe it?
I never would have guessed. No, I can't.
It's unbelievable, right?
Full of surprises today.
Yeah.
Full of surprises. It's like a game show. It's the worst game show ever. Do you want a link? You get a link.
Exactly.
You get a link. Everyone gets a link.
People right now are like, okay, I know I had enough of this podcast, just go and keep configuring.
You'll regret having me on the show. I think I told you that before you had me on the show, but
no, not because of you.
It.
Oh, not because of you were great. It's because of me, with this, we're going to share a link in the description of the video, right? No, this is great. One thing
it'd be funny if we have no links.
Yeah.
But continue.
At least we're sharing links. Exactly. More info. So one thing I'd love you to talk about, I know you create a blog on this, and I think it's great information as well for you to share with IT pros. It's about the security improvements that you're making in WSUS. For those customers that are still using WSUS, right? Troubleshooting IIS, I'd say that's not an easy thing. But, you know, if you're still using WSUS, I know you made some recent improvements, security improvements into it.
Yeah, for sure. So I personally love WSUS for certain reasons. This stuff has been the same for a long time, including some of the security protocols. And so what we really wanted to do is protect clients. At the end of the day, keeping clients secure is the number one goal that a lot of us have. Mm-hmm. And so what we said was, looking at this today, first of all, when clients were scanning, no proxy was the default, but then if you fell back to a proxy, you would use user proxy first. And then only if that wasn't in place, you would fall back to system proxy. This is all sorts of silly.
I have a question there, if you don't mind. I know there was some debate in the comment sessions of this blog around user versus system proxy. Can you just kind of real quick define that?
Yeah. So basically, it's who is authenticating. Is the person who is associated with the device authenticating themselves, or is the device itself being authenticated? And it really just comes down to, where's the source of truth? And for us, typically, if you look at most, we have user policies and machine policies. Typically, when it comes to scanning things, the source of truth is the machine, not the user.
Right.
And so this was a bit different. And further than that, user proxy puts you at risk for a huge amount of man-in-the-middle attacks, which means that there's pretty easy for someone to get onto your device and attack both pretty much the client if you're using user proxy. And so what we ended up saying was, we need to make it way harder to use user proxy. Like, admins, if you're going to use user proxy, that's your choice. You are in control. We're not taking it away from you. But we want you to know that it's your fault if you get attacked. Mm-hmm. I'm just kidding. That's not why. But we did want to try and send the message home of, please don't use user proxy. Right. Please try to use system proxy. And we really enabled this. And I think we said it in the blog. This is temporary. Mm-hmm. This is to give you time to move to system proxy or no proxy. And so that's really the message of, please start using these other forms of identification and validation to ensure your devices stay secure.
Right.
In addition, if you haven't already, please secure your server with TLS protocol.
That's important. Yeah.
HTTP is okay. HTTPS is much, much better. Just purely from a security perspective. And you can check out the blog, which we will share in the description, for more information of how exactly that works, what attacks you're vulnerable to. And then the last part I really want to mention, because it's super cool. And we've had this for Windows Update for years, but we've never had it for WSUS, which is a Cert Store. And so what this means is now you can actually certify that this device was supposed to talk to that server, and it can identify itself. And so what's really cool about this is this ensures an even higher level of security. And this is only available to those of you using TLS protocol servers. So if your WSUS isn't configured with TLS protocol, you won't be able to take advantage of this even higher level of security. And so when you're talking about someone who's trying to be secure, if you're an admin who wants to reach that highest bar of preventing attacks, really it's, okay, first step, don't use user proxy. Second step, make sure you're using TLS protocol. Third step, investigate cert pinning and going down that path. And that's really how you can keep your devices and your organization really secure when they're talking to your server.
That's great. I think that's very important. And I was kind of shocked. Shocked is too heavy. That word is too heavy. But it was kind of interesting for me to see the comment sessions of your blog and seeing people kind of debating what is a user proxy versus a system proxy. That's why I asked you to kind of define that. And I saw some people also saying, oh, no, it's the one that the user proxy is the one that you set up in the Internet Explorer properties. The other one the system proxy you set with the net sh command, etc. So it was kind of interesting to see that. That's why I asked you to talk about that.
I will say we need better documentation there, and we are working on it. Mm-hmm. So before you comment that, actually, please still comment that, because maybe then we'll focus more.
Sure.
But we do know we need better documentation on that, and we are working on that documentation for those. And I would say, especially with the proxies, it turned out a lot of those people, because we had one-off conversations, didn't have any proxy, which you don't need a proxy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's just
that's
if you
important to
have
know.
one, please make sure it's the right kind.
Yeah, no, that's very important to note. I agree. There's no need for a proxy unless there's, of course, there's some specific scenarios or even like a network scenarios where it's necessary. So, okay, this is great. One of the questions that I have is about this, right? So let's say, here's the scenario before I ask the question, okay? The scenario is I'm using SCCM for 20 years. Now I want to do Intune. And then I heard about this thing called co-management, where you can cloud attach your SCCM to Intune, and then you can start leveraging some of the cloud capabilities with SCCM. So what I'm going to do then is to, let's say I've been using software update point, which is essentially a WSUS instance, right, with IIS installed, et cetera, for many years. My Windows Update agents in the device have been scanning against this WSUS server. Now I switch to co-management. What's going to happen? Am I going to have my devices scanning against my old WSUS server? Or this is going to, the Windows Update agent on those devices that I had, the software, let me note, this is very important. I had the software update workload switched to Intune, right? What's going to happen with my Windows Update agent when scanning for updates?
Yeah. So I feel like that's got a lot of interesting terminology in it. And by that, I mean, people ask us these questions a lot. Even internally, people are confused. So it's bad. So first, let's cover what dual scan means. It's not one you mentioned, but it's fundamental to this conversation. So dual scan, just purely put, means your device is scanning both WSUS and Windows Update. And so that's a dual scan state. Co-managed means that you are dual scanning, but you're managing that device with Configuration Manager and Intune. So that's really just the terminology we use for the first party experience of dual scan. And there's a nicer interface and prettier stuff built up around it.
Right.
Things to note though, when your Configuration Manager is managing your devices, or you are using WSUS standalone, or you're using a third-party tool, a very common practice is disabling dual scan. This means going into group policy or CSP or WorldOut or wherever you want to do it and saying, no, even if there are deferrals configured, never scan Windows Update. A lot of people even go further than this and turn on some zero exhaust stuff to say don't ever connect to Windows Update internet locations. The most common mistake I have seen for people trying to test out moving to the cloud or becoming cloud attached is setting all of these policies in Intune and then forgetting that they have these policies disabling Windows Update and group policy. Heads up, group policy wins if you set don't scan Windows Update anywhere in group policy or CSP.
That's a good point.
It's going to listen and it will not scan Windows Update.
Right.
Like we take that pretty seriously. So that is the number one thing I've seen go wrong. Now, let's say you didn't do that. Let's say you unset those, you put them back to not configured, it's all good. You set the feature update deployment policy in Intune, you're all ready. Please pause your feature updates. Like all things policy related that you're going to configure in Intune or even through ConfigMan, policies can take up to 6 to 8 hours to reach the device, assuming that device is online and trying to connect to it. It might be pretty instantaneous. The device might connect directly back prior to doing a scan. But because devices only scan every 22 hours, it might not connect back to your management tool for between 6 to 22 hours. And so one of the other things is people really instantaneously expect things to happen. That's
exactly
not going to work here.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry. That's great. You're expecting this, this device has to actually connect back to the management server and get those policies, apply those policies, and then scan. And so for that to happen, I really typically tell admins just give it 22 hours. Like, if stuff doesn't happen in 22 hours, great, let's have another conversation. But give it 22 hours. Another part of this, though, is ensuring that you have safety nets in place. Like, if you're going to use feature update deployment policy, which I highly recommend in Intune, maybe pause for the first 22 hours, just in case just in case the device tries to scan before the server has actually taken that information in.
Good point.
Because pause is set on the client, you can ensure it's there
Right.
so that the devices don't accidentally get offered something they're not supposed to. And then after 22 hours, feel free to remove the pause and everything should function as it's supposed to.
Cool.
And that's, I guess, my very high-level overview of
Sure.
if you're going to move or get cloud attached. Some just small cliff notes.
Sure.
to
Keep
keep
me
in
honest
mind.
here then. What's going to happen then with this, based on what you just described, which was a great description of kind of the, how things work here. What's going to happen, this scenario that I presented to you, is that these Windows Update agents, well, of course, there's the caveats that you mentioned about having group policy saying no scanning anymore, etc. Let's consider there's nothing of this in place. The Windows Update agent will scan against the Microsoft updates directly. It's going to skip the WSUS because I have switched the software updates workload to Intune. That's going to happen directly from the internet. Is that a safe assumption?
Okay. Let's go it this way. If you don't configure any policies on your device is going to scan Windows Update, and you're going to get whatever consumers would get. Let's say you configured WSUS server URL. Great. Your device is now going to get all updates from WSUS. Great. Let's say that you then configure deferrals on your device, whether it's quality update deferrals or feature deferrals or both. Great. Your device is now going to scan get all of your Windows updates from Windows Update, and you can get non-Windows updates from WSUS.
Cool.
You disable dual scan, then you're back to WSUS. So basically, you're getting all of your Windows updates from WSUS or all of your Windows updates from Windows Update. Today, that's just the case of the world. And so you can safely assume if you're configuring WSUS on your device and you have deferrals configured, well, your device is now going to scan the Windows Update endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make one clarification there.
Mm-hmm.
Connecting to the Windows Update endpoint does not mean you're going to get all Microsoft Update product updates. It just means you're going to get the Windows updates. There are separate settings to control whether or not you get Microsoft Update product updates outside of Windows. We're talking here about the feature updates, the quality updates, and driver updates, etc.,
Right.
which have separate controls which you can manage whether or not you want them, when you want them, etc.
Good point. Good point of clarification as well. Love it. Okay, so there's one more item here that I'd like to comment on, Aria, but then I think it's more for me from the Intune side to give an update on this one. But please, let me know, add your comments here if you know more, of course. So there's so right now what I'm gonna do is just talk about one user voice item that I see for the Windows Update for Business area in the Intune user voice. Okay, it's not something that it's a direct feedback for you and your team. It's a piece of feedback for us here. It's about a scenario for Windows 10 device compliance. So people want to be able to check if if I'm not in a specific feature update version, I want to highlight that, kind of tell Intune should tell the admin that device fell out of a compliance, for example. And then with that, we can do like run reports and deny access to conditional access, for example, to kind of, make sure that people are updating those devices, right? So that's kind of the scenario. So there's a piece of feedback from customers there. When you guys, Intune in this case, are going to support checking for, if updates are installed or not, and check that and use that for compliance, right? And to report back on compliance for admins. So there's a new feature that we're working on. Of course, I'm not going to share any dates because I don't have any dates to share. But this feature is about setting up specifically for Windows devices, custom compliance. What's going to happen is this is going to bring us a lot of possibilities through a JSON file, for example. With PowerShell, you'll be able to do whatever you want outside CSPs. What's going to happen with this is, all the possibilities, all the probabilities that you can think, you can check and registry key or whatever, right? Whatever script you want to run to check for a compliance on the device outside CSP. So this is coming. I have no dates to share, of course, but this is coming soon. So stay tuned, please. That's a huge piece of feedback that we get, Aria. I don't know if you have any comments there.
No, I mean, like, that's
Okay.
great. I am very excited to see Intune reporting stepping it up and becoming even more awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. I don't have anything else, Aria. Do you have any final considerations or comments or whatever else you want to cover, talk about?
If you don't already, purely a self-promotion plug, you should follow me at Aria
There you
Updated
go.
on Twitter.
I'm gonna make sure that I put in the video as well.
Oh, goodness. Or stalk the tech community blogs for IT pros. We will be releasing some really, really cool new features pretty soon on there as we head towards the summer. So please keep an eye out and yeah,
Awesome.
give us feedback.
Yes.
Always.
Yes. And Aria is very passionate about feedback. I've seen your activity in Twitter, in the blogs that you write, etc. It's amazing. I think you guys should definitely talk to Aria and give her feedback. Also, add some
Please,
comments.
please, please.
Yes, add some comments here in this video as well.
Because I hate Twitter.
Oh, you hate Twitter? There we go. Don't go to Twitter then.
So I'm only there for you. I'm only there for you. So please comment.
Do you? So one thing that we can do as well, share. Do you have a user voice specifically for your team?
I don't, but I can make one if you want.
I know we're kind of Microsoft is also moving out of user voice. We're kind of coming up with our own tools there, but yeah. So what is kind of the preferred channel for customers to reach out to you? Then I'll let you frame this instead of me.
Oh goodness. Feedback Hub, Twitter,
Okay.
commenting on tech community blogs. I really appreciate the few of you who have asked questions on the tech community blogs that have nothing to do with the blog topic. That's fine too. If it's one of my blogs, I still get notified. And we have reoccurring Windows Update office hours where not just me, but there's about 10 of us sitting in a virtual room going through the questions that get posted. So anytime we talk about one of those, please feel free to join, ask your questions, give your feedback, rant about how much you want this new feature. Whatever it is, feel free to attend.
Yes, excellent. That's awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure to share those links here. Again, more links. There we go. In the description of the video as well, Aria. Thank you so much again for joining the podcast. It was awesome talking to you. Really appreciate it. Windows Update for Business is a great feature. I know there are a lot of customers migrating from Word, kind of the traditional approach, to Windows Update for Business. So we really appreciate the work that you and team are doing there. So thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right.